Zara's crystalline fingers traced the wedding band on her fourth appendage as she watched Marcus tend to their hydroponic garden. The soft blue glow of her Kytherian skin dimmed with contentment as she observed her human husband's gentle movements among the delicate flowering vines. 3 cycles had passed since their bonding ceremony, and she still marveled at how fortune had blessed her with such a peaceful partner. The Galactic Council had warned against interspecies marriages, particularly with humans. The propaganda feeds constantly repeated stories of their violent history, their primitive warfare, their destructive tendencies. But Marcus had proven every stereotype wrong. He spoke in soft tones, moved with careful precision, and showed infinite patience with even the most delicate tasks. When other species visited their orbital station home, they would comment on how remarkably docile her human mate appeared compared to the fearsome reputation his kind carried across the galaxy. Marcus looked up from the purple blooms he was carefully pollinating and smiled that warm expression that never failed to make Zara's photosynthetic patches flutter with joy. The Andromedan orchids are responding beautifully to the new nutrient mixture, he said, his voice carrying that gentle cadence she had grown to love. I think we'll have a full bloom cycle within the next rotation. Zara glided closer on her hovering platform, her 3 eyes focusing independently on different aspects of his work. The precision of his movements, the way he handled each delicate petal, the careful attention he paid to every detail. It all reinforced her belief that she had chosen the perfect companion. Among her people, the Kytherians, such gentleness was prized above all other qualities. Their crystalline physiology made them fragile, and their culture had evolved to value peaceful coexistence and careful nurturing over any form of aggression. You continue to amaze me with your tenderness, Zara said, her voice creating harmonious chimes as it passed through her crystal vocal chambers. The council members who visit us always seem surprised by your nature. They expect something far more primitive. Marcus chuckled softly, a sound that vibrated pleasantly through Zara's sensory membranes. People often judge based on old stories and incomplete information. I prefer to let my actions speak for themselves. He moved to the next section of plants, his movements deliberate and controlled. Besides, why would I want to be anything other than gentle with someone I love? The answer warmed Zara's core temperature by several degrees. This was why she had chosen Marcus when the Galactic Exchange Program had offered her the opportunity to bond with an off-world partner. While other species had presented themselves with displays of strength, wealth, or territorial dominance, Marcus had simply shown her kindness. During their courtship period, he had learned about Kytherian culture, studied their language, and even modified his quarters to accommodate her unique environmental needs. Their peaceful routine was interrupted by the gentle chime of their communication system. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the concerned expression of Commander Vex, a reptilian military officer from the local defense grid. His scales showed the mottled pattern that indicated high stress levels among his kind. Citizen Zara, we apologize for the intrusion, Commander Vex began, his forked tongue flicking nervously. We have detected an unauthorized vessel approaching your orbital platform. Our attempts at communication have been unsuccessful, and their trajectory suggests possible hostile intent. Zara felt her luminescence dim with worry. Their station was positioned in a relatively quiet sector, chosen specifically for its peaceful isolation. The idea of conflict reaching their sanctuary filled her with dread. Her species had evolved to avoid confrontation, and the very concept of violence made her crystalline structure resonate with anxiety. Marcus had gone very still beside the orchids. When Zara looked at him, she noticed something she had never seen before, a subtle shift in his posture, a different quality to the way he held himself. But when he spoke, his voice remained as calm and measured as always. What kind of vessel, Commander? Marcus asked, moving to stand beside Zara's hovering platform. Raider class, likely Scarab pirates, Vex replied, his scales darkening further. They've been hitting isolated stations in this sector for the past several rotations. We have a patrol ship en route, but it won't arrive for at least 2 standard hours. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of their station. Scarad pirates were notorious for their brutality, particularly toward non-combatant species. They viewed peaceful civilizations as easy targets for resource extraction and slave trading. Zara's crystalline structure began to vibrate with fear frequencies that created an audible humming throughout their habitat. Marcus reached out and gently touched one of Zara's stabilizing appendages. His touch was warm and steady, just as it had always been, but there was something different about his eyes. They had taken on a quality she had never noticed before. Not harder exactly, but more focused, like a lens bringing distant objects into sharp clarity. "We'll be fine," he said simply, and something in his tone made Zara's fear harmonics settle slightly. "Do you have emergency protocols we should follow?" Commander Vex outlined the standard procedure for civilian populations during pirate raids. Secure all valuables, activate distress beacons, hide in reinforced areas, and hope for a quick rescue. Standard advice for species that had no capacity for self-defense. As the commander's transmission ended, Zara found herself trembling despite Marcus's reassuring presence. "I'm scared," she admitted, her crystalline voice creating discordant notes that expressed her emotional state. "The Scarids don't negotiate. They take whatever they want." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and when Zara looked at him again, she saw that strange new intensity still present in his features. But his voice remained gentle when he spoke. "They won't take anything from us," he said with a certainty that seemed oddly out of place given their circumstances. "I promise you that." There was something in the way he said it that made Zara look at her husband with new curiosity. In 3 cycles of marriage, she had never heard him speak with such absolute conviction about anything involving potential conflict. But before she could ask what he meant, their station's proximity alarms began to sound, indicating that whatever was coming had just moved within striking range of their peaceful home. The proximity alarms created a harsh metallic shrieking that made Zara's crystalline structure resonate painfully. She watched in growing terror as the main display showed a sleek, predatory vessel closing in on their peaceful orbital platform. The ship bore the distinctive scarred hull markings of Scarad raiders, a sight that made even hardened military personnel retreat to safer positions. Marcus moved with that same careful precision she had always admired, but now it seemed different somehow. He walked to their communication console and began accessing systems that Zara didn't even know existed on their station. His fingers moved across the controls with a familiarity that surprised her, calling up defensive protocols and security measures that seemed far too sophisticated for a simple residential platform. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice creating worried harmonics as she hovered closer to observe his actions. "Those systems, I didn't know we had military-grade security features. Standard civilian protection packages," Marcus replied without looking away from the displays. "I made some modifications when we first moved in. Just basic safety precautions." His tone remained calm, but Zara noticed that his movements had become more efficient, more purposeful. Gone was the leisurely pace with which he tended their garden, replaced by something that reminded her of the precision military training videos she had seen. The raider ship was close enough now for their sensors to pick up detailed scans. The information that scrolled across their screens made Zara's photosynthetic patches dim with fear. 23 life signs aboard the attacking vessel, all showing the heat signatures typical of Scarad physiology. Weapons systems were charging, and their long-range communications were broadcasting the standard raider demands for immediate surrender and preparation for boarding. "They want us to power down all defensive systems and prepare to be boarded for resource assessment," Zara translated from the Scarad battle can, her voice trembling as she spoke. "They're giving us exactly 60 standard seconds to comply." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, still working at the console. "That's very considerate of them to provide a timeline." There was something in his voice that Zara had never heard before. Not anger exactly, but a cold edge that seemed completely at odds with the gentle man she had married. The communication system crackled to life again, and Commander Vex's increasingly desperate face appeared on their screen. Citizens, please respond. We show the raider vessel has achieved weapons lock on your position. Our patrol ship is still 97 minutes away. You need to comply with their demands and hope they leave you with minimal damage. Minimal damage, Marcus repeated quietly, and Zara was startled to see something that might have been amusement in his expression. These are the same raiders who left the Centauri research station a smoking wreck last month, correct? The ones who took 37 researchers as slaves. Commander Vex's scales rippled with uncomfortable acknowledgement. The Scarids rarely leave witnesses, yes. But compliance is your only option until help arrives. Marcus was silent for several seconds, and Zara watched as something seemed to shift behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice carried an authority that she had never heard from him before. Commander, I need you to mark this communication as classified and restrict access to senior command staff only. What authority do you have to make such a request? Vex asked, clearly confused by the sudden change in the usually mild-mannered human. Authorization code Delta 779 Alpha Black, Marcus said without hesitation. Confirm with Galactic Defense Command if necessary, but do it quickly. Zara watched in amazement as Commander Vex's expression transformed from confusion to shock, then to something that looked remarkably like fear. The reptilian officer's scales shifted to patterns she had never seen before, indicating stress levels that bordered on panic. Code confirmed, Vex said in a much quieter voice. What are your instructions, sir? The word sir hung in the air like a foreign substance. In 3 cycles of marriage, Zara had never heard anyone address Marcus with such formal respect. She looked at her husband with new eyes, seeing details she had somehow missed before. The way he held himself, the precision of his movements, the calm certainty with which he approached problems. It all suddenly seemed less like natural gentleness and more like carefully maintained control. I need a complete communication blackout on this sector for the next 30 minutes, Marcus said, his voice now carrying unmistakable command authority. No emergency beacons, no patrol updates, no status reports. Create a dead zone in your monitoring grid. That would be against standard civilian protection protocols, Vex protested weakly. Commander, Marcus said, and his tone made even Zara's crystalline structure resonate with respect. Trust me when I say that civilian protection protocols are not equipped to handle this situation. Execute the blackout. The transmission ended, leaving Zara alone with a man she was beginning to realize she might not know as well as she had thought. The raider ship was now close enough that she could see details of its weapon arrays through their observation ports. Energy readings showed that their attackers were preparing to fire warning shots, a standard prelude to force boarding. Marcus, she said softly, her voice creating uncertain musical notes. What was that authorization code? Why did Commander Vex react that way? Her husband turned to look at her, and for a moment his expression was so gentle and loving that she almost forgot the strangeness of the past few minutes. But then the proximity alarms intensified, and something shifted in his features again. Zara, I need you to go to our emergency shelter and stay there until I come for you, he said. The shelter in our bedroom has independent life support and communication systems. You'll be safe there no matter what happens. What do you mean, no matter what happens? Zara asked, fear making her luminescence flicker erratically. You're coming with me, aren't you? We faced this together. Marcus moved closer to her hovering platform and gently took one of her crystalline hands in both of his. His touch was warm and familiar, but there was something new in his eyes, a depth she had never noticed before, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time. I love you more than anything in this galaxy, he said softly. That's why I need you to trust me and go to the shelter. What happens next, it might be difficult for you to watch. Before Zara could ask what he meant, the raider ship's weapon systems reached full charge. Through their communication system, she could hear the scared captain's voice demanding immediate surrender in their harsh, guttural language. The sound of it made her want to retreat immediately to the deepest, most protected part of their station. But as she looked at Marcus, she saw something that stopped her cold. He was smiling, but it wasn't the gentle, warm expression she had grown to love. This smile was something entirely different, cold, calculating, and somehow predatory. It was the smile of someone who knew something that everyone else had missed. 30 seconds to surrender. The scared voice growled through their communications. Comply or face immediate destruction. Marcus walked to their central control console and began activating systems that Zara was certain had never been there before. Displays came online showing tactical information, weapon systems, and defensive capabilities that seemed impossible for a civilian platform to possess. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the alarms. "What is this? What are you?" He paused in his work and looked at her one more time with infinite gentleness. "I'm exactly who you married, Zara. I'm the man who loves you more than life itself. But I'm also something else that I hoped I would never have to be again." The raider ship's weapons powered up to firing position, and Zara realized that whatever her husband was about to become, she was about to see a side of humanity that the gentle man she married had kept carefully hidden from the galaxy. The transformation was subtle, but undeniable. As Marcus's hands moved across the control interface, Zara watched her gentle husband disappear and something else emerge in his place. His posture straightened, his movements became more precise, and his eyes took on a cold calculation that made her crystalline structure shiver despite the controlled temperature of their station. "Time's up, softskins," came the harsh, scared voice through their communication system. "Prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in immediate termination." Marcus's response was to activate what appeared to be a military-grade jamming system. The raider ship's confident broadcast suddenly became confused static, and their targeting systems began showing erratic readings on the displays that Marcus had somehow accessed. "That's impossible," Zara breathed, her three eyes focusing independently on the impossible array of defensive capabilities that their simple residential platform had somehow acquired. "We're a civilian station. We don't have military-grade anything." "We didn't," Marcus agreed, his voice now completely devoid of the gentle warmth she had known for 3 cycles. "But I do." The main display showed the raider ship attempting to lock weapons on their station, but their targeting systems were being systematically confused by interference patterns that seemed to anticipate their every adjustment. Zara watched in fascination and growing fear as her husband manipulated defensive systems with the expertise of someone who had been born to this kind of conflict. "Marcus, please tell me what's happening," she pleaded, her voice creating discordant harmonics that expressed her emotional turmoil. "This equipment, these systems, your knowledge of military protocols, none of this matches the man I married." He paused in his work long enough to look at her, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the gentle soul she had fallen in love with. "Everything I told you about myself was true, Zara. I do love gardening. I do prefer peace to conflict. I have spent the last 3 cycles being genuinely happy in our quiet life together." His expression hardened again as he returned to the controls. "But I never told you about my life before we met." The raider ship had given up on sophisticated targeting and was now preparing for a brute force assault. Their engines powered up for a ramming approach, intending to simply crash through their station's defenses and board through the resulting breach. It was a crude but effective tactic that had served scared pirates well against countless civilian targets. Marcus watched their approach with the calm attention of someone studying an interesting but ultimately predictable pattern. His fingers danced across controls that reconfigured their station's defensive grid in ways that seemed to violate several laws of physics. Energy readings spiked as systems came online that definitely had not existed when they first moved to this orbital platform. "Before I met you, I was Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran Deep Strike Division, he said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than revealing a completely different identity. Specialized in asymmetric warfare against numerically superior forces. 23 successful operations against pirate strongholds, insurgent bases, and hostile occupation forces. The information hit Zara like a physical blow. The Terran Deep Strike Division was legendary throughout the galaxy, not for their size, but for their effectiveness. Stories were told in hushed tones about human soldiers who could turn any battlefield to their advantage, who fought with a combination of tactical brilliance and savage determination that had earned them fear and respect from even the most warlike species. "You were military," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Elite military." "I was a weapon," Marcus corrected, his tone matter-of-fact. "Shaped and trained and pointed at problems that conventional forces couldn't solve. And I was very, very good at my job." The raider ship was now close enough for their sensors to pick up individual life signs. 23 scared warriors, all armed with heavy assault weapons, all confident in their ability to overwhelm whatever resistance a civilian couple might offer. Their ship's ramming approach was perfectly executed, designed to breach their station's hull and allow for immediate boarding. Marcus waited until they were committed to their attack vector, then activated something that made their entire station shimmer like a mirage. The raider ship's sensors suddenly showed empty space where their target had been moments before, but their momentum carried them forward into what appeared to be nothing at all. The collision was spectacular. The scared vessel struck what felt like solid matter, but registered as empty space on all their instruments. Their ship crumpled against invisible barriers while their targeting computers insisted they were hitting nothing at all. Emergency systems screamed warnings as their hull breached in multiple locations, atmosphere venting into space through ruptures they could feel but not understand. Holographic displacement field combined with selective gravitational manipulation, Marcus explained calmly, watching the raider ship's death throes with professional interest. "Makes us appear to be somewhere we're not, while creating solid matter where we appear not to be. It's complicated." Zara stared at the display, showing the critically damaged raider vessel. Its engines were failing, life support was compromised, and half their crew was already dead from explosive decompression. The remainder were frantically trying to establish communications, their earlier confidence replaced by desperate confusion. "How is this possible?" she asked, gesturing at the impossible technology surrounding them. "How do you have access to experimental military hardware?" "Because I designed most of it," Marcus replied, beginning to power down the more exotic defensive systems. "The Deep Strike Division didn't just use existing technology. We created new ways to fight, new approaches to conflict that gave us advantages over larger, more conventional forces." The surviving Scareds were now broadcasting surrender requests, their ship too damaged to retreat, and their weapons systems offline. But Marcus was studying additional displays that showed reinforcement signals being transmitted before their jamming had taken full effect. "They call for backup before we cut their communications," he said thoughtfully. "Standard pirate protocol when encountering unexpected resistance. We have approximately 47 minutes before a larger raider force arrives to investigate their silence." "More raiders?" Zara's luminescence dimmed to almost nothing. "How many more?" Marcus was accessing what appeared to be a comprehensive database of pirate operations in this sector. "Based on their signal patterns and response protocols, I estimate 3 additional ships carrying roughly 60 combatants total." He looked at her with an expression that mixed regret with grim determination. "I am sorry, Zara. I had hoped never to let you see this side of what humans can become." "This side of what you are," she corrected, beginning to understand that the gentle gardener she had married was only one facet of a far more complex individual. "What I was," Marcus insisted. "What I chose to stop being when I met you, and learned that there were better ways to live." He moved toward what appeared to be a sealed cabinet that definitely hadn't been in their living space the day before. But sometimes the galaxy doesn't give us the choice to remain retired. The cabinet opened to reveal equipment that made Zara's crystalline structure vibrate with instinctive fear. Weapons, armor, and devices whose purposes she could only guess at, all bearing the distinctive markings of human military technology. Everything was maintained in perfect condition, as if it had been waiting for exactly this moment. Marcus began selecting items with the same careful precision he used when tending their garden, but now that precision took on an entirely different meaning. This wasn't gentleness. It was the controlled efficiency of someone who had learned to kill with minimal wasted motion. You've been preparing for this, Zara realized. All this time, you've been ready for war. I've been hoping for peace, Marcus corrected, beginning to don armor that seemed to flow like liquid before hardening into protective shells. But I learned long ago that hope is not a strategy. The galaxy is full of predators, and sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to remind them why humans earned their reputation. As he spoke, Zara finally understood why the other species had seemed so surprised by Marcus's gentle nature. They hadn't been expecting docility from a human. They had been expecting this cold, calculated, supremely dangerous being who moved through preparations for violence with the same care he showed their orchids. The broken raider ship drifted past their observation port, its hull twisted and its crew either dead or dying. And Zara realized that her peaceful husband had just destroyed 23 lives without breaking a sweat or raising his voice above normal conversation levels. The reinforcements will arrive soon, Marcus said, checking weapon systems with practiced familiarity. And when they do, they're going to discover what happens when someone threatens my family. The waiting was the hardest part. Marcus had completed his preparations with methodical efficiency, transforming their peaceful home into something that resembled a military command center. Displays showed sensor readings from across the local system, tracking the approach of 3 additional raider vessels that grew larger and more dangerous with each passing minute. Zara remained at his side, unable to look away from the man she was discovering her husband truly was. The armor he wore seemed to respond to his movements, providing enhanced strength and protection while maintaining the fluid grace that had always characterized his actions. Weapons were secured at various points on his person, each one clearly familiar and comfortable in his hands. 43 minutes, Marcus announced, monitoring the incoming ship's approach vectors. They're maintaining standard raider formation, 2 assault vessels, and a command ship. Roughly 20 combatants per assault ship, plus command crew. They'll expect to find wreckage and maybe some survivors to interrogate. Instead, they're going to find you, Zara said quietly, her voice creating harmonics that expressed a mixture of fear and something that might have been pride. They're going to find us, Marcus corrected gently. This is our home, Zara. I'm not fighting for some abstract principle or military objective. I'm fighting for the right to continue our peaceful life together. The sentiment should have been comforting, but Zara found herself studying the tactical displays with growing comprehension of just how outmatched their attackers were about to be. Marcus wasn't preparing for a desperate last stand. He was setting up an ambush that would systematically destroy 3 ships full of experienced raiders. "How many people have you killed?" she asked suddenly, the question emerging before she could stop herself. Marcus paused in his monitoring to consider the question seriously. "In direct combat? Probably somewhere around 300 individual opponents over the course of my military career. In indirect actions, destroying ships, bases, supply lines, the number becomes harder to calculate." The casual way he discussed such numbers made Zara's crystalline structure resonate with complex emotions she couldn't entirely identify. Horror at the scale of violence he had participated in, but also a strange sense of security knowing that such capability was directed toward protecting her. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "I regret the necessity of it," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "I regret living in a galaxy where such actions are sometimes required. But I don't regret protecting innocent people from predators who would destroy them for profit." The incoming raider vessels were now close enough for detailed sensor analysis. The lead ship was broadcasting demands for the first raider vessel to report status, growing increasingly agitated as their calls went unanswered. Their formation began to tighten as suspicion replaced confidence. Marcus watched their approach with the focused attention of a predator studying prey. His fingers moved across controls that she was beginning to recognize as weapons targeting systems, plotting firing solutions with the same precision he used when calculating nutrient mixtures for their plants. "They're good," he admitted grudgingly, observing the raiders' tactical adjustments as they approached the location where their companion ship had been destroyed. "They're not charging in blindly. They know something went wrong, and they're taking precautions." "Will that make a difference?" Zara asked. Marcus smiled, and this time it was the cold expression she was learning to associate with his tactical thinking. "It will make it more interesting." The raider vessels spread out as they approached the debris field where their companion ship drifted. They were scanning for threats, trying to understand what could have destroyed a fully armed pirate vessel without apparent cause. Their weapons were charged and ready, and their shields were at maximum strength. None of it would matter. Marcus activated systems that Zara was certain violated several physical laws. Space around their station began to shimmer and twist as gravitational fields were manipulated in ways that seemed impossible. The raider ship's sensors began showing contradictory readings as reality itself seemed to become unreliable in their vicinity. "Localized space-time distortion," Marcus explained conversationally, "makes conventional weapons targeting impossible while allowing us to fire from positions that don't technically exist in normal space." The first raider ship to die never saw the attack coming. Energy beams emerged from empty space to slice through their hull like it was made of paper. The vessel simply came apart, its structure unable to withstand the focused application of force that had no apparent source. The remaining two ships immediately went to maximum alert, firing desperately at sensor ghosts while trying to locate their attacker. Their weapons passed harmlessly through areas where Marcus's targeting systems showed solid hits, while return fire seemed to come from all directions at once. This isn't just advanced technology, Zara realized, watching the systematic destruction of ships that should have been more than capable of defending themselves. This is something else entirely. "This is human warfare," Marcus replied. "We don't fight fair. We don't honor the enemy's strength or give them opportunities to demonstrate their courage. We identify weaknesses, exploit them ruthlessly, and end conflicts as quickly and decisively as possible." The second raider vessel fell to an attack that seemed to come from inside their own ship. Their hull simply imploded as gravitational forces were focused and compressed into a weapon that turned their own mass against them. The crew had perhaps 3 seconds to understand what was happening before their ship collapsed into a sphere of twisted metal the size of a small room. The final vessel, the command ship, tried to retreat. Their engines powered up for emergency escape, but space itself seemed to resist their efforts. They found themselves moving through areas where distance became meaningless, where full power produced no movement, where their instruments showed impossible readings that made navigation futile. Marcus ended their confusion quickly, almost mercifully. A weapon beam that twisted through folded space struck their engine core directly, causing a cascade failure that destroyed the ship instantly. 23 more lives ended in a brief flare of light against the darkness of space. "It's over," Marcus announced, beginning to power down the exotic weapon systems. "The threat is neutralized." Zara stared at the debris fields where 3 ships and 60-plus raiders had been destroyed in less than 10 minutes. The scale of the destruction was overwhelming, but what truly stunned her was the casual efficiency with which it had been accomplished. Marcus had eliminated experienced combat forces without apparent effort, as if he were pruning dead leaves from their garden. "The Galactic Council stories about human warfare," she said slowly. "They weren't exaggerations, were they?" "If anything, they were understated," Marcus replied, beginning to remove the armor that had transformed him into something beyond her understanding. Most species don't really comprehend what humans are capable of when we stop holding back. As the exotic equipment powered down and normal space reasserted itself around their station, Zara watched her husband gradually transform back into the gentle gardener she had married. But now she understood that the gentleness was a choice, not a limitation. The man who had just casually destroyed a raider fleet was the same person who spent hours ensuring that their orchids received precisely the right amount of nutrients. "Why did you retire?" she asked as he secured the weapons that had just saved their lives. "Why give up that kind of power?" Marcus paused in his work and looked at her with an expression of infinite tenderness. "Because I met you," he said simply, "and I discovered that creating something beautiful is infinitely more satisfying than destroying something ugly." The communication system chimed softly, and Commander Vex's nervous face appeared on their screen. His scales showed patterns that Zara had never seen before, indicating stress levels that bordered on complete breakdown. "Captain Chun," Vex said in a voice barely above a whisper, We show complete elimination of hostile forces. Are you both unharmed?" "We're fine, Commander," Marcus replied in the gentle tone that Zara now realized concealed depth she was only beginning to understand. "You can restore normal communication protocols. The threat has been permanently resolved." As the transmission ended, Zara found herself looking at her husband with new eyes. The same hands that had just wielded weapons capable of folding space were now carefully checking their orchids for damage from the station's defensive maneuvers. The same mind that had orchestrated the destruction of an entire raider fleet was now concerned about whether the vibrations had disturbed their plant's delicate root systems. "Are you still the same man I married?" she asked quietly. Marcus smiled, and this time it was the warm, gentle expression she had fallen in love with. "I'm exactly who I've always been, Zara. I'm someone who will do absolutely anything to protect the people and things I love." She understood now that this was what the other species had sensed about humans, what had made them so nervous about her choice of husband. They hadn't been looking at Marcus's gentleness and seeing weakness. They had been seeing the careful control of something far more dangerous than they were prepared to confront 3 days after the raider attack. Their orbital platform had returned to its peaceful routine, but everything felt different to Zara. She watched Marcus tend to their hydroponic garden with the same gentle care he had always shown. But now she understood that those precise movements came from training in disciplines far more deadly than horticulture. The Galactic Council had sent a formal inquiry team to investigate the complete disappearance of an entire pirate fleet. Their preliminary reports spoke of impossible weapon signatures and physics-defying tactical maneuvers that had left the investigating officers both impressed and deeply concerned. The fact that such capabilities existed in what they had believed to be a simple civilian residence had caused considerable distress among the Council's military advisors. "The investigator asked me 14 different ways how we survived," Zara told Marcus as he carefully adjusted the nutrient flow to their Andromedan orchids. "I told him we hid in the emergency shelter until help arrived. I don't think he believed me." Marcus smiled, the warm expression that had always made her photosynthetic patches flutter with joy. "Commander Vex probably filed a very interesting report. He's been remarkably helpful in ensuring that the official records remain simplified. Because of that authorization code you gave him?" "Among other things," Marcus replied, moving to examine a flowering vine that had been his special project for the past cycle. "Vex served in the Outer Rim conflicts. He knows what happens when human military units get involved in local disputes. He understands the value of keeping certain capabilities off the official records." The implications of that statement settled over Zara like a heavy blanket. Her husband wasn't just a retired soldier. He was someone whose very existence was considered a state secret by multiple galactic governments. The gentle man who sang to their plants and calculated optimal growing conditions was also someone that military commanders went to great lengths to keep classified. "How many others like you are there?" she asked, hovering closer on her platform to study his face as he worked. "Retired deep strike operatives?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Perhaps a few dozen scattered throughout the galaxy. Most of us found quiet lives after the war ended. We learned that peace was more valuable than the excitement of conflict, and they all just disappeared into civilian life. The smart ones did, Marcus said, his tone carrying implications that Zara didn't entirely want to explore. The alternative was to remain active military assets, available for deployment whenever some new crisis required our particular skill set. I chose to garden instead. A soft chime from their communication system interrupted the conversation. The display shimmered to life, revealing an unexpected visitor request from Ambassador Thren, the Kytherian diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council. Zara's crystalline structure resonated with surprise. She had submitted her bonding documentation to the embassy cycles ago, but had never expected direct contact from such a high-ranking official. Citizen Zara, Ambassador Thren began, her crystalline features showing the formal patterns that indicated official business. I hope you will forgive the intrusion, but recent events have brought your residential status to our attention. May I request a private audience to discuss matters of mutual concern? Zara exchanged glances with Marcus, who nodded slightly. Of course, Ambassador. We would be honored to receive you. The ambassador's arrival 2 hours later brought with it a small diplomatic entourage that seemed notably nervous about their destination. Zara watched through their observation ports as the official transport approached with obvious caution, its escorts maintaining defensive positions that suggested they were prepared for possible hostile action. Ambassador Thren herself was an elegant example of Kytherian evolution, her crystalline structure displaying complex harmonic patterns that spoke of centuries of careful genetic optimization. But Zara noticed that her official entourage included individuals whose species she didn't recognize, beings whose presence suggested that this was more than a simple diplomatic courtesy call. Citizen Zara, the ambassador began after the formal greetings had been completed, I trust you understand that recent events in this sector have attracted considerable attention from various galactic governments. We defended our home, Zara replied simply, using the harmonic structures that indicated polite but firm resolve. I was not aware that this violated any treaty obligations. The methods employed in that defense have raised certain questions. One of the ambassador's companions interjected. Zara identified him as a Vulian intelligence officer, his species known for their analytical approach to potential threats. Our technical analysis suggests the involvement of capabilities that officially do not exist. Marcus had remained quietly in the background during the formal diplomatic exchanges, but now he stepped forward with that subtle shift in posture that Zara had learned to recognize. Gentlemen, perhaps we could speak directly about what you're really here to discuss. The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate. The diplomatic pleasantries disappeared as the visiting officials focused their attention on Marcus with the intensity of predators evaluating a potential threat. Captain Chun, the Vulian officer said, his voice carrying undertones of both respect and wariness. Your reactivation was unexpected. I haven't been reactivated, Marcus replied calmly. I simply defended my home and my wife from pirates. That doesn't require official sanction. The weapon's signatures detected suggest otherwise. Another member of the delegation interjected. This one appeared to be from a species Zara didn't recognize, but his bearing suggested military intelligence. Those capabilities aren't available to civilian populations. Marcus smiled, and Zara recognized the cold expression that meant he was thinking tactically. I'm retired, not dead, and I didn't surrender my personal equipment when I left active service. The implications of that statement seemed to disturb the visiting officials considerably. Ambassador Thren's crystalline structure flickered with harmonics that expressed diplomatic concern. Captain Shun, she said carefully, surely you understand the delicate balance that exists in this region. The various powers have agreed to maintain certain limitations on military capabilities specifically to prevent the kind of escalation that your intervention might provoke. Are you suggesting that I should have allowed pirates to attack my wife? Marcus asked, his tone remaining conversational, but carrying an edge that made even Zara's crystalline structure resonate with unease. "We're suggesting," the Vulian officer replied, "that there are procedures for dealing with such threats. Channels that exist specifically to prevent the deployment of strategic-level capabilities in local conflicts." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Zara watched as something shifted behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice carried an authority that seemed to fill the entire room. "Gentlemen, let me be very clear about something. I chose to retire from active service because I discovered that I preferred peace to war. I chose to build a life with someone I love rather than continue serving as a weapon for various governments' convenience. But those choices were mine to make." He moved closer to the diplomatic group, and Zara noticed that all of them instinctively stepped back slightly. "If you want to maintain the delicate balance in this region," Marcus continued, "I suggest you ensure that people like my wife are never again placed in situations where they require protection from me. Because the next time someone threatens my family, I won't limit myself to destroying a few pirate ships." The silence that followed was profound. Ambassador Thren's crystalline features showed harmonic patterns that Zara had never seen before, expressing something that might have been profound diplomatic alarm. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Captain," the military intelligence officer said quietly. "It's a promise," Marcus replied. "I want peace. I want to tend my garden and love my wife and never again have to remember what I was trained to do. But if the galaxy won't allow me that peace, then the galaxy should remember very carefully what happens when humans stop being polite." After the diplomatic delegation departed, Zara found herself alone with her husband in their garden sanctuary. The orchids bloomed around them in peaceful profusion, their delicate beauty a stark contrast to the conversation that had just concluded. "They're afraid of you," she said quietly. "They're afraid of what I represent," Marcus corrected, gently adjusting the positioning of a flowering vine. "I'm proof that humans can choose to be peaceful, but that we're never defenseless. That's a concept that makes a lot of governments very nervous." Zara moved closer to study the man she was still discovering. The same hands that had just implied the capacity for system-wide destruction were now carefully pollinating flowers with infinite gentleness. "Do you regret marrying me?" she asked. "Your quiet retirement would have been much simpler without someone to protect." Marcus looked at her with an expression of such love that her entire crystalline structure resonated with warmth. "Zara, before I met you, I was a weapon that had learned to mimic being a person. You taught me how to actually become human. You gave me something worth protecting, worth choosing peace for." He gestured toward their garden, their peaceful home, their life together. "This is what I fought for during all those years of war. I just didn't understand it until I found it." As the orbital platform continued its quiet rotation around the local star, Zara understood that their peaceful life would continue. But now she also understood that it would continue because her gentle husband was someone that the entire galaxy had learned to respect. The orchids bloomed around them, beautiful and delicate, protected by love and defended by capabilities that most civilizations could only imagine. And in that combination of gentleness and strength, Zara finally understood what it truly meant to be married to a human.